be sure to unmute yourself so people can hear you. But for right now, we'll just leave it muted because we have over 100 people on the call this morning. Okay, I want to be sensitive to everyone's time, so I'll jump right in. Hello and welcome to Natural Start Alliance's Forum on Reopening. My name is Emily Van Lan, and I'm the Communications and Conference Coordinator for the Natural Start Alliance. This is our second forum dedicated to conversations and guidance around reopening nature-based programs amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're really thrilled to have two amazing guests today who will be sharing their experiences with reopening. Before I get started though, I wanted to take a moment to recognize our collective emotional state right now. This has been a challenging few months, especially the last few weeks, with the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, among many others. And it's really been heartening to see the response within our communities. And as an organization that believes that all young children need frequent opportunities to experience, learn from, and care for nature and the environment, we know that we and the collective field of early childhood outdoor education have a lot of work to do. And this is all happening during a global pandemic, with programs navigating how to safely reopen and provide young children and their families with the social emotional supports and the nature connection that we all need right now. These are incredibly trying times, and it is more important than ever that we stand together, we support each other, and we stay connected as we figure out a way forward. So thank you all for being here. I really like this comic from Liz Climo, if you know her. It's a nice little thing to make you smile this morning. And with that, I just would like to take a moment to recognize the amazing Natural Start Alliance team, the brilliant Betty Olivolo, who is on the call today, along with Christy Merrick and Ken Harrington, who aren't able to join us today because they are off working hard on another Natural Start Alliance project. Many of you know that we're hard at work planning our annual conference, which will be held 100% online this year, this summer, July 29th to the 31st, so mark your calendars. We really appreciate your patience with us as we juggle this new and challenging task. I mean, we never imagined that we would be doing a nature-based learning conference all online, but this is the new world. And we're really, really thrilled to announce that we'll be opening registration for the conference next week. And we really hope that many of you will be able to join us for what we feel is going to be an amazing event. Okay, so why are we all here today? There's no one way to do this. There's no one size fits all guide to reopening, which is why we won't be using this time together today on sharing specific guidance from Natural Start. Instead, we want to use this time to problem solve together, to allow professionals from around the country in a variety of programs to share their experiences navigating the bumpy road to reopening. I wanted to also share where programs are at in their reopening process and how that compares to 3 weeks ago with our last reopening forum on May 19th. So you can see that here. Of those programs or people who registered for the forum today, 91% of programs reported that they are not open, with only 9% of programs reporting that they are open right now. So the vast majority of programs are still closed. But taking a look at when programs plan to reopen, more programs have a clearer idea of their reopening plans, with 28% opening at some point this summer, whether that's in the next 2 weeks or later on. So when we're all considering plans for reopening, there are a lot of factors to think about, including the criteria for reopening, program capacity, teacher-child ratios, policies and procedures to reduce disease transmission, teaching strategies and routines that are going to be new, among many other things. There is a lot to unpack here, and we know that we can't get to all of it in one conversation. We're not going to solve this problem in 90 minutes. The majority of our time today will be spent in small groups in which you can dive into any and all of these aspects of reopening. But I wanted to just take a moment to highlight a couple of resources that we have recently put out. So we recently published a feature story on the Natural Start Alliance website all about how programs that are open are using masks. Both of our featured speakers here today, Amanda and Andrea, contributed to that story. I'll try when I can to plug that link in the chat so you can check it out. But forgive me today because I am hosting and also running the tech support. So I'm trying to admit people from the waiting room at the same time, but I'll get it in there as soon as I can. We also have a open Google folder for people to add resources to regarding reopening. So it's a public folder, anyone can add to it. Right now, there are guidance documents from the CDC, American Camp Association, and others. There are reopening plans submitted by nature-based programs, including Will Smith Zoo School's pandemic policy, which Amanda will be referencing today, and general resources such as recommendations for certain products like no-touch thermometers or hand washing stations. And we really encourage you to add to it. The only way it can be a really good resource to everyone is if we get lots of contributions. There's a few things in there now, but like I said, we'd love for there to be more. And I will share that link as well. Maybe that will just go out in the email, the follow-up email, but keep an eye on that. It's also linked on our website. So now I'm ready to introduce our wonderful guest today, starting with Amanda McMickle. Amanda is the director of Will Smith Zoo School at the San Antonio Zoo in Texas. She also serves on the Natural Start leadership team. We're lucky to have her. And Amanda's school reopened in mid-May. And then our next speaker will be Andrea Sambrook. Andrea is the director and owner of Annette's Preschool in Hinesburg, Vermont. She is also the former director of research and education at the Gazelle Institute of Child Development. So she has a wealth of experience in the field. Annette's Preschool remained open throughout the pandemic to serve the children of essential workers, and now is currently open to more families. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will hand it off to Amanda.
Hello. All right, let me share my screen here. Okay, let's see here. Let me get this going. Okay, so let's see how I'm going to get this to work. Okay, so opening procedures. Just some general information. Sometimes it's good to know kind of like the population of schools served so you can kind of see how relevant the information is according to your kind of the program you run. But we're located in Texas, in San Antonio. We have 230 students enrolled. We started off, we opened at the beginning, like kind of at the beginning of May, and we were seeing about 20 kids a day. Now we're up to about 60 kids. So we're still quite a bit lower than what we typically see. Typically we have up to about 160 kids a day because some are part-time and some are full-time. But again, every week we get a few more kids that start attending. We did start with essential workers only, but when that was lifted, we were able to serve all students enrolled. We have 35 staff members, 10 classrooms. So we do have some staff that come in and sanitize and disinfect when classes are outside and stuff. And our hours are 8 to 5:30, so we do serve a lot of working families right now. Oops. All right, what I have found is communication is super important, even though we don't, like Emily said, a lot of times we don't know the answers to anything that anyone's asking. But this is some of the advice I wish I had known starting out from the get-go, is that it's okay not to know the answers. This, you know, I'll talk a little bit on the next screen, but change is really hard for a lot of people, and just kind of restating the fact that, you know, I've never run a school during a pandemic before. I'm not sure but these are the things that I do know. So backing that up with what you do know kind of grounds parents and staff with something. And just like when we talk to our staff and fellow teachers about the importance when anxiety is high with kids, that you just kind of need to ground them with something, that is what I found really helps. And then to lean into hard conversations. There's so many times where I felt like I didn't know the answer, so I'd find myself saying, oh, I don't want to answer that call, or I don't want to talk about that. But every time that I've just kind of leaned into it and just done it, I feel so much better once I've done that. We did decide long before we knew what was in store for us. We got the information about how procedures were going to have to change when children arrived at school and when they left. And so what we did was we made a video to share with families on what that was going to look like. So for example, walking up to the school with their child and having have the child take their temperature taken, having to ask the questions. We really knew it would help if the parents could see what that would look like, but also for the students to see what that looked like. So I used my own children for the video. This was just a note. I think this video is going to be shared, but just a note, this was before masks were required. So it was missing a few things, and we would probably redo it if we had to. But at least it gives a good outline of, here's what you're going to see, what's going to happen when you arrived at school, and this is what it's going to look like when you pick your child up. Again, it was very helpful. We also found sending out weekly email updates was very helpful as well. Even if nothing changed, we would say, we have not had any updates to change anything, but this again is where we stand now. And we would even put in the subject line, 6/11 update, so that they would know it's an update on the procedures for the school. And just being transparent has been so helpful with the parents and the staff. Again, saying what we know, saying what we don't know, but just having that transparency has been very helpful. More lessons learned. Decisions really give relief to the parents and staff too. Again, once we said we made a decision that we were opening May 4th, it was like a collective exhale among the families and the staff. It was like we had a light at the end of the tunnel. We had had something to look for, something to plan for, even though we kept saying like this could change. We're not positive. But once we had a date that people could hold on to, it really gave a lot of relief to us. Change is hard. Just remind people there's no silly questions. I had a parent ask if how we were going to monitor that our staff were social distancing outside of work. And I was thinking like, how am I going to do that? Like, I cannot do that. But I just had the conversation of like, if that is a concern that you have, perhaps you guys are not ready to attend, if those are the things that you're worried about. But, again, or another question I had was, because we did online classes during this time that we were closed. And so a couple of parents asked, well, can we still do the online classes if we don't attend? And I was thinking, well, the teachers are going to be with the students. They can't do both. But again, it's just, we've never gone through anything like this. So it was just like, going on to the next bullet, just spreading grace everywhere. Like, we have been learned to be so flexible. Like parents have said, well, we might come for a week, but then we might stop coming. That's okay. Could we come for just half day? I feel comfortable. I want them to get social, but I just feel better when we're all home together. Absolutely. Like we have just been really flexible and just spreading grace as far as wide as we can. And then your energy spreads faster than your words. So we even start out with little mantras about like, at least we're here together, and things could be a lot worse. We're so happy to be together and be serving these families. We will get through this. We're in this together. Just a lot of like positive affirmations just to get us in the right energy, in the right space. Because as soon as those kids are around us, they feel our energy, and the parents as well. So we really want them to be relaxed and ready to start the day. And a lot of times I end most statements with during a pandemic. So like if I talk to the staff and I'm like, we really need to come up with a pandemic policy during a pandemic. Like it's not going to be easy, or we're getting ready for the end of the school year. So we're trying to organize some kind of graduation. we're doing it during a pandemic. Like, we're all tired. We're all super tired. We're super stressed out. We have a million things going on. So just, again, showing ourselves some grace is helpful. We did end up developing a pandemic policy that you'll see. We are NACE accredited, so we follow the same kind of policies that we make for our NACE portfolios, but we tried to hit on everything. One thing that I learned kind of throughout is staff really like to know things before the parents. We're part of a larger organization, so we have to get a lot of things okayed by San Antonio Zoo before we share it. So a lot of times I felt like we knew something at the very last minute. So I would kind of like send an email out to like parents and staff at the same time saying, this is when we're opening, or this is what's happening. And staff were like, I know, like, I just need to let it sit before I start getting texts from parents and stuff. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was an issue. So that was helpful to know. And then it was nice to know that licensing trumps CDC, because I was hearing things from CDC, licensing, the governor. I was like, which one should I listen to? And basically when I talked to my licensing rep is there's no CDC like police or you know, like the licensing have their reps. They don't have the CDC. So licensing trumps the CDC. The CDC is, you know, what you should be doing or following, but licensing might have something more specific for your age group. So that's important to know. And also just to focus on too, when a lot of the policies and the guidelines will say when possible. One thing that when I talked to the one of the different licensing rep that was on the committee to rewrite some of our regulations, she said they put in there when possible a lot because they really want us to focus on the emotional well-being of the kids. And like when they say, you know, 10 groups at a time, don't mix groups. She said if a kid is running up to the fence to say hi to a kid, don't feel like you have to go like tackle the kid and be like, don't go over there. You know, just, you know, let them go say hi and then say, okay, buddy, remember we don't go past this stump because we want to make sure we're safe. But, you know, just, they put that when possible because they just want to really focus on the emotional kind of well-being of our kids that we're going to have to really focus on later. But those are some things that I found were very helpful to remember. And if you have any other questions or suggestions or feedback, feel free to contact me. All right, now it's Andrea's turn.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And Andrea, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and she'll be giving a short presentation now as well.
Great. My pictures are going to come at the end, but thank you for having me and for asking me to have this important conversation and dialogue with you. It's an ongoing iterative process. I feel my heart never really settles, but I'm going to share my story a little bit about how we are where we are today and the things that got me through and that are continuing to get me through, and our families and our kiddos and staff. So my name is Andrea Sambrook. I am the director, but I'm also the owner of Annette's Preschool in Hinesburg, Vermont. I think being an owner is a little different, so I'm hoping that I don't have as many hoops to jump through as Amanda did, and that might make my story a little different, so maybe you can identify in that way. So each of us come from a really different place and have different obligations, so I'm just going to share mine and hope that it lands in a way to help everyone. Our story, briefly, with nature-based education, we serve children from 6 weeks all the way up to age 8. We have we have a license for 116, but we intentionally keep that at about 100. About 25 staff as well. We have children, about 25% of our kiddos are siblings, and we're in a fairly rural place in Vermont. We it came to nature-based education through the emergent curriculum door, and started 8 years ago in a way where we were theme-based. We were segregated by grade, and when I and my family acquired the program, we brought a vision and a mission and moved into mixed-age classrooms, moved into an emergent focus, and then eventually kind of wove that together with a nature-based curriculum the last 2 years. So that's where we are on that big picture. We have about 3 acres of green space, which is such a fortunate thing right now, given that we have group spaces and sizes and distances in the outside space. And so some of the pictures I'll show you about some of what we've done to modify our outside spaces to create more use outside. During the COVID operations, I will say that We did Google Classrooms. We turned it on a dime in a staff meeting. We decided what that was. We all invited each other. We invited families. It was very fast turnaround. We had noticed basically through our newscasters that we would be closing. In Vermont, it happened on a Sunday night. We had recommended families stay home on Monday and Tuesday, and we were closed by Wednesday. It was a really bumpy arrival. So we turned to Google Classroom. We did professional development online. Our basic goal, even in our infant room, was stay connected and to find ways to read stories online, to keep your face alive online with those kiddos, even though from a concrete operational perspective, they think that you're kind of there, they want to touch you, but that was essential to maintaining relationships. Making sure that if someone in your Google Classroom isn't necessarily seeing your posts that came every day, teachers shared their postings, they would go on walks and bring their camera so that it was almost like a David Attenborough show. And, you know, I was really proud of my teachers for being able to bring nature in through a keyhole, which is so hard for kiddos. And so as we did that, we also virtually held hands. We had meetings every day. We had games morning where on Zoom, we would have games that were important to keep staff's emotional feelings up and connected. And that was a roller coaster. We decided of our own volition on March 31st to open an essential classroom for families of essential workers. I always say all families are essential, but we're just focusing on essential workers. And that was a little tricky because the definition of that kept changing, but in the end, we had one classroom. We had an infant toddler teacher, and we had an infant teacher and a toddler teacher. We actually kept our siblings together. We had about 4 or 5 children and myself on site. So it was very quiet, but we were practicing all of the guidance from the Vermont Department of Health and the protocols for screening, for temperature taking, for questions, for drop-off, which no longer included families into the classroom. And so how that would feel and what that would look like was something that we were gathering and then eventually starting to ramp up. I will say that it was very stressful when we heard in mid-May that our governor, because the public schools were closed as well, but the governor announced that it would be okay for childcare programs to open. And our state really led the nation in stabilization funds, so families were able to hold their spots through a variety of payments from the state. But that ended on May 31st. And I'm just going to be very frank. It was stressful because all the funding for the families was gone. If we then had families that weren't returning, our revenue stream went like this, you know, like on a trampoline. And so that was stressful for June 1 to reopen. So what we did is we created a rubric for thinking about this. And we said, and this was really helpful to create a framework from our mission. I will say that what it did for me is it freed me to, in a moment of crisis management, it freed me to stop caring about the things that weren't important, the things that kept me up at night. It was suddenly, this is what we need to do. Here's the way we're thinking about it. And it really helped me. It grounded me, just like Amanda said, you know, have a communication pattern that is solid and that it builds on itself. So what we did is we had four metrics. The first one was our health guidance. So the Department of Maternal and Child Health in Vermont held forums for us, and we were in touch with them. The guidance changed almost daily, which made it really hard, but we at least knew where we stood with them. So we wanted to be able to reopen with fidelity for this particular guidance, and that's what I said to our families. The second, can we do it, and can we do it well? We knew there were certain musts, and then there were all these other recommendations, and I want to do as many recommendations as I can. But for example, I can't clean my whole playground and I can't clean our natural woods. I can't do it. We will do our best efforts. And so I said to parents straight up, we're going to have a best efforts bucket. And there are things that are going to be in there, but we're not going to be perfect. And allowing us to not be perfect, but to do our level best, and that's all you can ask of yourself and each other and your kids and families, felt a little freeing, like I'm just only human. So the health guidance, we then said to families, so your family schedules matter to us. What your needs are matters to us. So as we were determining what hours to open, that wasn't something we took into consideration. The third piece was staff capacity. So for teachers, they need to, not be having a baby, because that would exclude them from being able to even come back, even if they wanted to come back from work. So some programs in Vermont really struggled with even the ability for their staff, based on their demographics, to be even able to come back. So you have to know what it is in your staff, and you know them best, what capacity you have. The other piece of that capacity that I said to families was, this is about social and emotional learning and lifting. I said, my staff are going to be doing the work of 100 social workers on day one. And I don't mean 100 kids. I just mean 100 social workers. This is so important. And I want to make sure they have the space to recharge their own batteries and to be able to do that. As well as, I'll talk a little bit about staffing, about overstaffing in order to do that. And then the last piece of the metric was sustainability. Is it going to be sustainable for families? Is it going to be sustainable for my program? How much of a deficit do I need to run? Do I need to take out personal loans from my own program to do this? What is the PPP looking like? What are these other supports looking like? And is it sustainable? So the hard part about these things is it's not a B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or I'm on the top and this is on the bottom. They're levers that all work together. And I said, we're going to be iterating this process. If families create our survey and they say, I'm not coming back until September, then that's information I put into the hopper, and I have to look, is it going to be sustainable? Can I do this? So that really helped families at least understand. And when they came back with the questions, just like Amanda said, whether you're monitoring your staff elsewhere, or am I going to be able to have full day from 7:30 to 5:30? And I said, no, please know that you're going to have a shorter week, Monday to Thursday. You're going to have a shorter day, 7.5 hours, and we're going to be staggering our arrivals and staggering our pickups. And this is the best we can do. And when you have confidence and you allow yourself to live into your mission, I had someone who wrote back to me who said, I can tell that you're living your core values, and I just want to say thank you. And that to me made this decision worth it, because when that's what you have, you can absolutely lead into them. I will say that, again, what Amanda said was fantastic. Communication is so important. Absence of certainty or absence of communication sends that anxiety meter right into the roof. And that's not good for you or your staff or your family. So I held a number of family forums on Zoom so that I could answer questions online. I had my sister director helping me, taking questions from the chat box. It really felt a little anxious because there were some hard questions, and I just learned to say, I don't know that. And I started every forum with, this is what I know to be true at this time, today, because it might change. And it's not that I'm not telling you the truth, I'm telling you what I know to be true. So that helped me really kind of put hand over heart. I will say, I made a couple other notes. Get outside as much as you can. You're going to be in fresh air. All our staff are wearing facial coverings, but we decided for children not to wear coverings. And we took that absolute decision. 2 years old, 3 years old, 4-year-olds, we all know they suck on them. They are going to be playing with them. They're going to fall down. They're going to get hot. They're going to end up on the floor. They're probably going to touch this place that was just sanitized for lunch, and someone else is going to touch it. So I said to families, the mouth of your 3-year-old will end up in more places than it ever would have with a mask than it would without. And I'm going to be trusting the screening, and I'm going to be trusting our staff, and that's what we're going with. If you're not comfortable, just like Amanda said, you might not want to come back right now. This is what we can offer. And outside, if we had a wonderful dialogue with Brina Holmes, who's our director of maternal child health, and we asked questions. If you're more than 6 feet, if you're outside and you can take your mask down and make faces at a baby, and you can talk to your preschooler, and you're running around because you're exercising, you should not have a mask on. You don't want to get dizzy. Some of the feedback that came to me from other directors, and I will also say, find your people, find your cohorts of directors that I aligned with people I didn't really know that well before, and now I feel I have a whole new sense of community. Some of those directors said, so some of my teachers are reporting dizziness. They're getting dizzy, and they realized if the masks are too tight or they're too thick because it was cold and you might have wanted something warm, you might not have enough exchange of carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is right up close, and they're not meant, right? They're not meant like the health providers would wear them. So we're all making our own and using fabric. So be very mindful of making sure that staff can breathe and that they don't get dizzy trying to, be manic about it. I will say, go slow and overstaff. the trauma really takes time to show, and it will take time to flow. And I think that there's a giddiness of re-entry, but at the same time, you have to recognize that everyone has been traumatized in some way, whether it's missing someone, whether it's losing something, whether it's worrying. We know that children think that they might have caused COVID-19, right? I thought a bad thought about my mom, and now there's a virus, right? And this is how kids think. So we need to anticipate the way the concrete thinking and really be there for those big feelings. Yeah, I had a child who was deciding when he was having difficulty with a transition, he thought he wanted to spit. And I was like, okay, really? In a pandemic? I was just like, please, that's not the one thing you want. But that was a real feeling for this kid. So, you know, we're monitoring, we're managing. I will say that the power of community for children is something that it's like all their celebrations put together, to be able to be in close proximity with kids. You cannot social distance with preschoolers or babies, nor should you. I mean, you need to hold babies who are crying. You need to do that. We get outside and kids will disperse, and they will be outside. So they're in the healthiest environment possible. But if you spend a lot of time hovering over a child, don't touch this, don't touch that, you need to be clever about how you position the kids at the table and make these games that are a little bit distant. That's the best you can do. And it's just not really practical in preschool to do that. The beauty I had, the support of Brina Holmes, is that she got that. She's like, I understand early education, and these are real issues. So you can't have everything. I will also say we did do a social story as well. We took pictures. I will recommend using face shields, which are the see-through, very lightweight. They're like $2 each, and they fit with a foam piece here. And I use those for screening. When I welcome someone into the door at our screening stations, they see your whole face. And before that, I was using a mask and with funny things on it and making jokes so that they would, and then I also have, we each have pictures of ourselves. So is this really me with a mask on? So we talk about ways of making sure they're constantly seeing our smiling faces. So the face shields are tricky with cuddling if you're holding babies, but they're good for when you have distance and you want kids to become familiar again. And then I will share, I think if I'm not out of time, Emily, can I show 3 pictures?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So let me see if I can do this now. Okay, I hope, can you see my screen, folks? Great. So this first picture, it's not a slide, but it's a picture of a new area where we were planning on doing this, but when COVID came, we realized it was even more important. So this is the lower piece of our little woods, and it's actually from a view from our chicken coop. We made this little twig fence because the hill goes way down, but what we did was we cleared it of the, what do they call it now? It's like, it's not sumac, which I love. It's it's gone. I'm in front of all these people and I'm forgetting the word, but it's an invasive shrub, and we took down no trees and we managed to scrape away all of this scrub, which created what we found is we think we have a spring. We found a new section of ledge that came part of our space. And then we had the idea, which did cost a little more money. We said, why don't we put a berm in, because there's a road right on that place right beyond it. And that cuts the sound, and it also cuts the noise of the road. We will be putting a fence that will go around that space, but currently we've just seeded it with wildflowers, and we're waiting for the kids to develop their paths. And that rolling down the berm is something else. We wanted to stretch ourselves with great heights and speed and so forth. So that's that was a piece of what we did. The chickens have been really great to have. I'm going to see if I can click on this a little better. Maybe this will work. Does this show? This is one of those 360 pictures. This is our lower meadow. We've actually set it up because we need to separate pods for our clubhouse camp, and they can't be together. So we have 2 groups of 15, and within those 15, we have 2 groups, and then we have 2 pods of the 15, so 30 in total. So we set up a tent, we set up a hand washing station, a porta potty. We're going to be having a little bit of a zip line and some slack lines. We're going to be setting up a number of outdoor activities here. There's some trees over to the right. We're going to be putting some waterproof fabric. There's some sheer fabrics to hang in the trees. And so this was a whole new space. We had to purchase all these new things. So it can be expensive to reopen. The black line at the very top there is silt fencing, which is not expensive, but we did buy 600 feet of it in order to put it around our property in different ways to create, because our driveway goes along that piece there. And so making sure, these are school-age kids so that they have the boundaries. This is the other piece of that berm looking up, and you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor at all, but up in, that's the other piece of our woods. And we divided our woods into 4. So we have a figure 8 up top, we have an upper woods, a lower woods, and then this is the wildflower garden. It's not ready for little feet yet, but we expect in July that it will be. So that was something that we said, we need to do this. It's improving our space and our use. And then I also want to show you a picture of a mask from my 6-year-old friend who said to his mom, "Mom, when you wear a mask, they're going to miss your smile. So I want to make a new one for you."
Aww.
And I will end it there and see if I can stop sharing my screen. And then I will share my mask that another 6-year-old made, which is my favorite. And it's this one. And it's called Action Chicken. This is a chicken pecking the ground. And of course, this is a 6-year-old. So actions are right here. The chicken has to peck down. So this is my mask today. And this is the other side for tomorrow. So it's great to have kids involved in this, especially when there's so much stress and anxiety. And I'll leave it there, but I'm happy to join the groups later and answer any questions. I hope it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was wonderful. Lots of great information. I love that mask. That's just the sweetest thing. So for just a few minutes, if anybody has specific questions, I'm going to share my screen again. If you have specific questions for Amanda or Andrea, feel free to jump in now. You can unmute yourself and ask a question. You could type it in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that. We have just a couple minutes for you to do that before we head into breakout rooms. So does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Oh, Lydia in the chat asked, how do you set up acceptable hand washing stations?
I can jump in. We purchased, in the past when we had our little woods, we wanted to have a porta potty there. It made the biggest difference in the world. And we also then hired or used a hand washing station, which has paper towels and water, and you pump it with your foot. We had enough last year. This year, we almost thought we couldn't open without them. And we ended up getting ours from a field hospital that was being decommissioned. And so the company that had put them there was able to divert them to us. So we actually got the ones that we needed. However, I will say there are some great things online with 2 buckets and a pump and a pedal pump that kids can use that go onto sort of a little pressure gauge, and it pumps the water through. It does require that you empty it, and it does require that you refill it, and you need kind of a toilet or someplace to put it in a hygiene way. But there's a lot of creativity, and you know, the Vermont After School Alliances was giving out free soap, and I thought it was hand soap. It was just bar soap, right? So they're expecting, hey, get water and get soap and get washed. And so that was, I know there's a lot of them, and the licensing is deferring to the health department. So for here in Vermont, how are you doing it, Amanda?
Our building is kind of in between our 2 play areas. We're on a little over 2 acres. And so they come in, they wash their hands, but they can't go to one or the other without going through the building. And then up our back has a hill, and there's 2 restrooms with hand washing stations up there. So they're not immediately close, but they're accessible throughout. So yeah. I see the next question has about the pandemic policy. That was really just to outline, you know, how we, like, for example, pick up, drop off, kind of outline that. And then it also talks about when, because children will need to be sent home if they have a fever, if they develop a fever. We don't let them in if they have one. But if they develop a fever, if they have a cough, any of those things. But then before it was 24 hours fever-free without medicine. Now I think it's 72 or something like that. So just outlining those new things covers all of that. It talks about what we will do if someone in the building has been diagnosed with COVID. So it outlines that, just covers kind of everything that we know of. It has that. And then we have like an appendix with the zoo's policy, CDC, licensing, and just so we have everything all in one spot.
And just to repeat, we have that Google folder with some of those resources in there, and the policy that Amanda is referencing will be uploaded in there, so you can look at it in full. Thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing that. And just another note about that Google folder, if you do add anything to it, because there's potential for there to be lots of documents in there, just make sure that you are naming them something that indicates where your program is from or what that resource is about. And there's, just to look at a couple other questions, there's a lot of questions, of course, as we suspected. I'm curious, there's a question in here from Carol about if you're keeping each of your groups in its own space or if they're switching from space to space outdoors and how you're managing that.
So indoors, we did two things. So I will start with our summer camp. Our summer camp was divided into the two pods. I showed you the picture of the lower pod, and then the other one is in the upper playground. The upper playground has access to a classroom. That classroom would normally be our backup in a thunderstorm. With the guidance of no more than 25 people, we can't put both pods in there in an emergency. So I created a preschool classroom that will remain empty or limited use for the summer so that that second pod can go into that classroom in the event of an emergency. So that was one thing. The other thing that we did was we divided they are using our little woods and our playgrounds in rotation. You just can't use them together. So we actually had a document that the teachers put together about, okay, so that's the upper woods now, and we just put rope across, and we have enough space so like we could. The other thing we were going to do, and we did do on one playground, is we spray painted 6 feet on one side, which is the older side, because we knew the babies would be on the other side of the fence and couldn't socially distance. So we spray painted a line in one location. In the woods, there's so much space that we aren't really worried about that, but we are using the woods as a space, and I'm not cleaning it. I don't know how to do that. On the playground, we are cleaning it. We have a spray and dwell time of 5 minutes and leave, and it'll dry. And so we're using that on our tent poles. We're using that on our metal slide. We're using that on all the hand stuff, but I can't do the toys in the sandbox. Like that's that trying hard but can't do it basket. I will also say this is something that we did do this year, and you might be able to do it in your community too. We made a partnership with a campground of 400, I think it's 400 acres at Common Ground in Starksboro, and we made a collaboration where we said, so for 2 of our sessions in the summer, so 4 weeks total, we're going to spend day trips in our van because we were able to distance with the size of the kids that we had, and the fact that one pod was going during the whole week, so they were using the van back and forth. So we made 2 trips in the morning, would take everyone to this 200-acre beautiful place, lake and field, and they have a kitchen and shelter, but we also managed to take our lifeguard. We are lucky enough to have an in-ground pool here, and we give lessons, etc. That lifeguard's going to do the morning on campus here, and then they're going to go to this other place and do the afternoon. So the point I'm making is that if you have a collaboration where you can maintain your safety at both ends with the hand washing, the sanitizing, and the shelter and everything, then consider using another person's space so that we are taking our second pod off campus, and then they're going to trade the next week. And that's actually, I will say, that's been something for parents on the fence about whether they feel they want their kids to come to camp. It's actually drawn people in, and they've wanted to enroll, because we've had a lower enrollment in our camp, which was filled within a day of registration, of course, back in February or January, but now it's a different story. So collaborations, separating spaces, using spaces not at the same time, but in rotation, and then cleaning as best we can.
Great. There are a lot of questions, more than we'll be able to answer, but I'm wondering if we can answer just one more before we go into breakout rooms. And again, anything you see in the chat here, great things to talk about in your small groups, because these two ladies, as amazing as they are, don't have all the answers. They're figuring it out too. So we're all in this together. There's a question in here about what you've seen about how children are responding to or how they're dealing emotionally with the social distancing aspect. I'm wondering if either of you can speak to that, or if you have any resources that you've read or that you think are really great around this topic. So if either of you want to kind of take that question.
She may have more because she might see the older kids in camp, but we just really, you know, same with the staff, we do the same with the kids. So we want our space to be a safe space of talking about feelings and emotions during all of this, and providing that space for the kids and the staff. And the kids are doing pretty good. It's, you know, just yesterday I heard one kid tell another one, maybe you can come over for a play date when the virus is done. You know, they're just, you know, they're very well versed with what they hear and what they're saying. And so they're, you know, they're like us, they're processing and figuring out in the best way they can. We don't social distance the kids here. We just found, same as Andrea, we expressed that we didn't feel it was, you know, very developmentally appropriate to do that. And there's been a few times that I've seen kids, and this goes along with the emotional piece, embrace, and I mean like embrace another child, like eyes closed, I'm feeling this moment, where I thought, my gosh, if we tried to social distance, they would not have been able to connect with another kid. And we're, you know, part of what drives us is connecting to ourselves and each other. And so we also decided not to social distance with the kids here. So maybe Andrea may be able to speak more on that.
So one of the things, is this the social distancing thought about social emotional? Is that the question? Yes. So I put something in the chat box about that one of the trainings that we did. I'm forgetting her last name, Alyssa, but it's called Seed and Sow, and she puts out a nice resource called it's called the Emotion Coaching Guide, and it's really helpful about feel your feelings and things that are typical in child development. I also put in the Center for Emotional Foundations of Social Emotional Learning, and CEFLS is the short name for it, and they use that in early ed, and they have cards about how to manage and walk away and take a turn and express yourself and identify feelings. So that's kind of an early ed go-to resource. I think that you know, it's important, I think, for adults also to say, you know, express how they're feeling and how they're managing. I spoke to a parent over the break who had a 4.5-year-old. They just had a baby, and the 4.5-year-old, she called me and said, I'm so worried. I think I need a therapist. My child is taking off their clothes and running into the woods away from me. She's screaming at me and saying, why do you hate me so much? And I said to the mom, I said, first of all, a 4-year-old with a new baby at home can rock their world anyway. They would be in a rage. That would not be absolutely abnormal. We're also in a pandemic. She goes, but my husband and I work from home usually. This isn't different. I said, well, it is different, and they know that. And I said, what she's really saying to you is, Mommy, do you still love me? Right? It's not that they hate you. It's, do you still love me? And she says, when I reframed it that way, she said, of course I love her. I said, so she's just looking for reassurance that she's still okay, and so are you. And so that really helped her. And you know, just, I said, the other thing you should know about from, and I'll mention Gazelle Institute, that the work of either T. Barry Brazelton is a great resource. The work of Arnold Gazelle, we renormed his study. And the point of that is that you need to expect that even without a pandemic, children's development in preschool and onwards, basically from, you know, birth through age 5, goes in cycles. And every 6 months, it's actually weeks when they're infants, but by the time you reach 3, every 6 months, the child's behavior and emotional internal climate will go from disequilibrium into equilibrium. And so you may think, we had potty training all sorted out and now it's gone. Well, you know what? You're probably in a disequilibrium point before you're gathering up your gumption in the disorganization to go forward again. So even though it doesn't happen on the half year, it's very, very typical. And for parents to realize that even in a pandemic, kids are developing and they are going to go through these phases. So what may look like the end of the world could be a developmental phase, which is just going to coincide with a pandemic. Or it's also, I said to the same mom, can you express how you feel on a regular basis? You don't have to be perfect. You can cry in front of your child and you can say, I'm feeling overwhelmed today. I think I need a walk. I think I need some fresh air. I think I'm going to go listen to some music. Today, it's, I feel sad now, but it won't stay that way. No, feelings never stay the same way forever. And understanding that helps you get out of the moment. So, I guess there's a lot of early, thinking about another resource would be Gartrell, and he talks about sort of a 5-point how to manage social emotional conflict about, and again, identifying your feelings, I see 2 children and I see 1 stick. Can someone tell me what's going on, right? How can I help is usually what it is. It's not about I'm going to solve your problem, but you look so sad. I'm noticing 2 kids crying in 1 stick. Yeah, and then they'll tell what happens. And how does that make you feel? So, and then you repeat and reiterate what it is, and then help the child to identify the feelings, to be able to identify a solution, their solution, and then be able to sort of check back in and see if it worked. So it's sort of a 5-step way of just processing emotions. That's what we do. So no matter whether you're outside or inside, these are going to bring up what feels like irrational feelings, but they're all coming from a place that's human, and acknowledging them as, you look really sad today. I can tell that it's hard being 3. Sometimes I say that, like, that's tricky being 3. Today's a hard day, and then let it sit. So that might be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you both for answering those questions. Like I said, still lots of questions. Really appreciate everyone for your thoughts, and for any of you who've been adding resources, and thank you to Betty for mentioning in the chat, if there are resources around this or any resources that are relevant around reopening, we do encourage you to share them in that Google folder, because that just will become a really great repository for everyone to kind of add to and use those resources as we're all figuring it out. So thank you both so much for your time today. I know that we just had so many good conversations going that we took a little bit more time on this first part, but it was so valuable. I hope you all felt so too. I know we saw some really great comments in the chat, thanking Amanda and Andrea for sharing today, and thank you for sharing your contact information if you have anything to follow up with them about. And now we're gonna move into breakout room. So if you've joined any of our forums in the past, they've usually been an hour, and we've just used the first 20 minutes or so for some introduction piece and then gone into breakout rooms, but we're gonna leave it open until 1:30. So we'll end in breakout rooms. So you don't need to return to the main room. You just leave whenever you're ready. You don't need to join the breakout rooms. If you're done, feel free to just head out now. But we'll send everyone to breakout rooms, and hope you have some really fruitful discussions there. We will be continuing to have these forums because this is going to be an ongoing conversation. We're trying to stick to about every 2 weeks. Sometimes that doesn't work out, but keep an eye on our communications. Hopefully you're subscribed to our newsletter or follow us on social media so you can kind of see when we'll have these more often. But thank you for everyone for being here. And if you'll just give me just a moment, I'll share with you how breakout rooms work. If you've joined one before, you probably know, so I'll go quickly. I feel like we're all Zoom experts at this time. You'll be randomly assigned to rooms. A window will pop up on your screen, and you'll have to click join to join the breakout room. Oh, this is old information. This is one volunteer will report out, but we don't need to do that. We'll just end in breakout rooms. You can use the chat to send messages to people in your breakout room. If you want to be sharing resources, just know that that only goes to the people in your breakout room. It does not go to everyone. And if you have any issues in your room, you need help, there's something strange going on and you can't figure it out, there is a button on your kind of toolbar, or whatever you want to call it, that says ask for help, and but feel free to leave whenever you're finished. And thank you so much. Just give me just a moment. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to put everyone in Breakout.